Breaking news. The upcoming ban announcement on Monday has Wizards of the Coast in a scramble to balance the meta. Stay tuned as we delve into some of the prime ban candidates from each of the top decks. Now, Rictus, what's the weather like in Standard Land?
Forecast this week includes leftover candy in Halloween Cauldron guarded by a screaming nemesis you love to hate. Don't forget the Church of Dimir on Sundays, though, or else the preacher will swing your curiosity. Now bring on the... All right, Rebels. Today we break down the results of 7 major Standard tournaments over the past week, but none so critical as Spotlight Liverpool. Vivi made up 30% of the metagame this week with 2 trophies and posted an absurd 61% day 1 win rate in Liverpool, while en route to taking it all down. With 6 Cauldron decks in the top 8 and 13 Cauldron decks in the top 16, I think we can officially say rest in pieces, Vivi. We're all ready for the next chapter.
Mono Red tried to claw its way back to another Spotlight title, but Vivi wasn't going to be denied this week. Red only had a 46.6% win rate in day 1 of Liverpool and made up 23% of the meta this week. With only a single copy in the top 16, it's safe to say that Red is also looking forward to Vivi's last wild ride. Red managed a single trophy this week, but otherwise looked unremarkable.
Dimir Tempo managed a 14% meta share this week and a single copy in the top 16 of Liverpool, but that's where the good times ended for this perennial third-place finisher, as it managed not a single trophy for the 4th consecutive week. While Kaido and Curiosity look nervously at the looming bans, wondering if either will also be taken out, we all know that if this archetype comes through unscathed, it'll be a top contender moving forward.
Kicking off our challenger tier is Sultai Bringer, hot off a top 8 in Liverpool with 5% of the meta and a single trophy. Sultai's day 1 win rate across the pond was 59%, making it the second best archetype as a whole going into the bans. Despite the extensive main deck graveyard hate, this deck keeps growing in popularity, and it's time to acknowledge that with some tuning, this is a contender for the throne.
Simic Counters had a disappointing show in Europe, but still managed to make up 7% of the meta globally, though it claimed no trophies. Will the Nope Rope find that next gear to shift into, or is it doomed to the challenger tier next season? We've got some thoughts, so stay tuned.
Rounding out our challenger tier is Jeskai Control, with a 5% meta share this week, though notably 0 trophies once again.
Over in Brewer's Corner, I'll take a look at Boros Weapons, fresh off a finals appearance in an MTGO challenge.
And I'll highlight Mono Black Aggro, also managing a top 8 this past week during an MTGO challenge. Now let's swing on over to our archetype breakdowns, starting with Cauldron. Alexei Polot, I hope I'm saying that right, piloted their Cauldron build through a field of 584 players in Liverpool this past weekend, capping off an incredible run with a trophy at the end. Rictus, why did this build embrace Opt and Duelist of the Mind?
So, I mean, it turns out we do want the draw, discard, flying, and vigilance. We just don't want it to be attached to Steam Core. The 3 toughness in a field, full to the brim with Torch the Tower and Burst Lightning, is no small feat, nor is costing 2 mana instead of 3 in a field with Floodmaw. This particular build went lower to the ground, and it opted for more of a prowess feel with Vivi combo as the backstop. Duelist also pairs well into those turn 3 threatening combo, so you can use Torch and Floodmaw to take apart their answer while simultaneously filtering Vivi from your hand into the yard, and then you can play Cauldron and just go off. Like, at the end of the day, Athena, this build figured out what the others couldn't, which is you just got to go a little bit lower on the curve, rely on the Riddlers to keep refilling and restocking, and push the combo as the backstop to what is mostly a prowess feel with Profts.
Yeah, I think we've seen, we've talked a lot about if the Proft shell can survive a VV ban with Mako and FOMO and things like that, right? And I think our general consensus is yes, that deck can. But can a prowess shell survive a VV ban?
It's a tougher one. Can it survive a VV ban? Possibly, but it sure can't survive a Profts ban on top of that. And that's kind of the question mark here. Are we going to lose just VV, or are we not going to lose just VV? And do we get any new pieces out of Avatar? I've not seen a whole lot that goes into this prowess shell necessarily. There's, of course, the Firebending Student is a consideration, but it's tough to say if it can survive the VV ban. I know it survives Cauldron, and I know it can survive Profts potentially if you keep VV. But if you lose Profts and VV, I think it dies.
I probably tend to agree. If anything, it'd have to go back to kind of what we were seeing before with Planospheres and things like that. Liverpool may have been dominated by Cauldron, but it wasn't too long ago that Baltimore was won by our second best stack, Mono Red Aggro.
Liam Tiller-Collins made it to the semi-finals of Liverpool's Standard Field before falling to the eventual champion. Athena, is the deck better with this build going up to 24 lands and emphasizing Nova Hellkite at the top end?
I'm gonna have to say no, mostly on the back of Hellkites being pretty middling into both Cauldron and the Mirror. This build actually looks like the builds we saw a few weeks ago with 4 Hellkites and with Frenzy being the removal spell of choice, right? It's kind of balancing on this Screaming Nemesis. This is still the card that dominates the Mirror, dominates the Cauldron matchup, right? Absolute powerhouse. And if something's gonna get banned from Red on Monday, it kind of has to be this card, right? The sideboard features a lot of obliterating bolts, notably, right? The average top-end toughness continues to rise with Riddlers, and people are running like Hellkites and Stingerback Terrors for this matchup as well. So we're going to start seeing higher and higher damage removal spells keep going into this format.
I mean, that's fair. I look at this, Athena, and I go, why are we splitting? We have one Twisted Fealty. We have one Vengeful Possession. They both functionally do about the same thing. Is there a reason that they're sitting in the sideboard and not the main board? And is there a reason we have a 1-1 split?
I can see them not being in the sideboard. There are definitely times when those cards aren't that great, right? If you're ahead, the most they're maybe doing is removing a blocker, which could be the same thing that a removal spell does. What you really want out of those cards is taking a threat and swinging with it for lethal. And a lot of the time, if you're ahead, you don't really allow that to happen, and you're more likely to be ahead pre-board, right? As for the 1-1 split, I actually tend to like things like this in sideboards. This is where you see sideboards with a lot of 1-ofs. They have a lot of like 1-1-1 splits of the same type of card, right? It just kind of comes to preference. I think when it comes to a 1-1 split, it gives you more versatility in which one you're getting, right? Because there's arguments for each. So kind of just throwing one of each in there gives you the option to get either one of them.
Make people respect it, especially in an open deck list environment where they have to look at those. It's kind of like that old Snakeskin Veil trick where you just put one in the 75 and you go, okay, now the bluff's here forever, right? So I totally get what you mean when you say you want multiple of the same effect but differentiated slightly so that they have to respect the positions. That makes a lot of sense. Now, while Red sweats through another ban announcement next week, let's look at our other Tier 1 contender that needs the bannings to leave it unscathed entirely. Dimir Tempo.
Adney Rosenvinge, I hope I'm saying that right, made it to the top 16 of Liverpool before missing the cut to top 8 with their iteration of Dimir Tempo. Rictus, do you want Strategic Betrayal in the main of this deck?
I mean, frankly, till Cauldron is gone, yeah. And it may come back if Reanimator keeps showing up. This deck is just waiting to play fair Magic against the rest of the format. It isn't really well positioned against Cauldron, even with all the hedging, but it's absolutely ready to go to war with the other archetypes. And you can kind of see how this one was positioned against Red with that Elegy Acolyte in the main. You can see the Corsi Revenant in the main. You see those early removal pieces with Stab and Tragic Trajectory. So this build in particular is hedged harder for Red with a minor hedge for Cauldron still in there with Strategic Betrayals and Azure Beastbinders, but it's really hedged against other aggro decks. Whoever was playing this did not want to lose to Mono Red. I don't know who burned you out at one point, but I feel you. We've all been there. It's just how it goes when it comes to Dimir and playing up against those hyper aggro archetypes.
Yeah, we've been seeing a lot of these hyper aggro archetypes kind of historically beat these black mid-range decks, right? I mean, if we look at Convoke before, it also kind of did the same thing. In that vein, will Simic Counters be a favorable matchup post-bans, do you think?
Gang, I can admit when I made an error in judgment. I think it was last week or the week before I talked about 0 Point Ballad being a sweeper against Simic Counters, and Athena, you and I talked about it, and you're absolutely right. 0 Point Ballad is at least a turn too slow for the average Dimir versus Simic Counters draw, so I don't think there's a good solution to Simic Counters unless we start seeing some good Wrath effects like Path of Peril style that can come back into the format and help Dimir, because otherwise they're just going to sit there with Paw Patch recruits and make your removal feel really rough. You know what I mean? Like, they can get under you so easily, and they can scale under you so easily.
Yeah, a lot of the power of this deck comes from its more top-endy threats, right? And whether this deck sees a Kaido or Curiosity ban or not will determine how good it is, or how good it continues to be, anyways. In the meantime, we're going to move over to a deck that's extremely unlikely to see a ban, Sultai Bringer.
Combo Man, that's literally the name it gave me. Took Sultai Bringer all the way to Liverpool's top 8, highlighting a dark horse run in a sea of Cauldron. Athena, I've seen this deck built about 100 different ways. What do you like about this build?
I think Oblivious Bookworm is the 2-drop creature this deck desperately wanted. 3 toughness is really important, right? If you're against Cauldron, they have to use, if they're using Torch the Tower to get rid of it, they have to sacrifice something, and it's usually something they care about, right? It cycles you every turn, lets you churn your deck into your graveyard, exactly the game plan that this deck wants to do. We're also using Terror of the Peaks to enable a combo kill after the Bringer effect, which many times gives you an outright kill through basically whatever interaction most opponents would have against you. We're doing away with cards like Esper Origins that make us far too reliant on the graveyard to get our value, right? That was another complaint that you had a lot of the time when talking about this deck, is people running Esper Origins and kind of doubling up on the weakness to Grave Hate in the main board, right? And we have that single copy of Smuggler's Surprise, which is really nice when the graveyard does get cut off, because it lets you play a lot of these big threats.
Yeah, I'm so happy that we saw a new iteration of this deck finally come out. I keep looking at the Esper Origins builds like, what are we doing? But I look at this build, Athena, and I see that we have 2 Valgavoth sitting in the main board even. Do you see the future builds eschewing Valgavoth from the main board or even the deck entirely? And if so, what do you want instead?
Valgavoth is an interesting case, right? The card is really good at stabilizing you against aggro specifically, but outside of that, I mean, a lot of decks can remove it pretty easily, especially the go-wide aggro decks can actually remove it, right? It's good against something like traditional mono-red or something like a go-tall deck, right? But if you're playing against Simic Counters and they just like sacrifice 3 little tokens to bounce it out of the way, it feels pretty bad, right? As for what I'd like to see instead, I mean, I don't know if we really need like 8 things to reanimate, maybe just 7 or 6. So maybe I'd just like to see that more slanted towards the mid game or the early game to kind of help you in other matchups.
And I mean, honestly, we've seen lore, and we know what's coming in. We know Formidable Speaker's coming, and that's probably when we start dumping that number down on Valgavoths, Terror of the Peaks, etc. if we want to. I don't know. It's fascinating when I look at Valgavoth as to whether it's actually good or if it's just win more in so many positions. But some decks want to sweep the board, others want to build it. Let's look at our favorite swarm strategy right now, Simic Counters.
Hamuda, love that guy, made it to the semifinals of Saturday's 34-player MTGO challenge with their build of Simic Counters. Victus, where do you stand on the inclusion of Hemosymbic Might in the main board?
So this card is fighting with Spyglass Siren and Paw Patch Recruits for space. It's more explosive, but it's a higher risk as it does next to nothing on its own, right? So you have to hit the Nope Rope, that Roid Rage. You got to hit the Innkeeper's Talents. You have to find ways to scale this card because as a 1/1 for 1, it is entirely unimpressive. I also am a little curious here. We're only seeing 2 Keen-Eyed Curators in the sideboard. We're not seeing any in the main. That is a heck of a risk to take in a world filled with Bringer and Vivi Cauldron right now. It might be correct once we get to these bans again, but I don't know, like Bringer's probably not getting any bans, and that deck is good. And Keen-Eyed Curator is one of the only good outs you have to it sitting in green. Lastly, there's that question we keep talking about with Tivar versus Sentinel, and that Tishana's is also a huge question mark.
Yeah, I think that Tyvar versus Sentinel debate's probably never going to end for us, right? Everyone else seems to be on Tyvar, but we really like Sentinel from trying this deck. But one card that I'm seeing in here, right, is Avendo Waking Haven. Is that a good inclusion or a cute one?
I mean, to me, I think it's a little bit more win more, and I base this on the fact that we are an aggro deck that need to curve, like we have to curve. That is what this deck does. It has to get under you. It has to get there before you do, because it does not last long once your opponent starts responding with haymakers. So I don't like Avendo that much because it's kind of like saying, what if we get to the corner case where we just need a boatload of mana and nobody's blown up our board in a major way? And like, yeah, you could get to those stalemates and then, it helps with the Tiver, but like I'm already off Tiver. I don't like that card, so I don't really want Avendo anyway because I don't think we need all the extra mana. I think I'd rather be swinging with creatures rather than stationing them on average. And again, you're going to get corner cases in both directions, but nothing's going to feel worse than opening a hand that has like a Willow Rush Verge and an Avendo and a Lawnmower Elf. And you're just sitting there like, oh, well, if this was a forest, this hand is not only keepable, but we are probably ahead. Versus, I guess I'm mulliganing because of Avendo yet again.
Yeah, I think I am personally kind of back and forth on it as I keep testing this deck, right? I honestly haven't had a moment where it's messed me up, and I haven't had a moment where it's won me the game, right? And I've played this deck a whole lot over the past month. I think all of us have doubts that Ouroboros is seeing a ban for this deck, so no worries, Simic lovers. Our deck is safe. Let's move down to our final deck in Challenger tier, Jeskai Control.
Zendikar Games went on a tear this weekend, posting back-to-back top 8s in consecutive MTGO challenges with Jeskai Control. Athena, what is keeping this list from taking down trophies right now?
I think when it comes to this Cauldron meta, right, ever since they found the Quantum Riddler attack, Riddler is just too much for Control to fight through post-board, especially against a deck like Cauldron, which is an extra grindy game piece in a deck full of grind that's also very aggressive and can win explosively, right? Just hits you from too many angles. We're having to turn to a mill plan with River Churn Monument in order to get our late game wins against Cauldron, which doesn't feel great when we also want to board in things like Rest in Peace to slow them down. We're running triple Authority the consoles in this deck's main board. It's a good card when paired with Split Up, but it also stops a lot of the things from Cauldron, right? It stops Harmonize from Warped Creatures or a surprise Wild Ride on a Riddler. So it's a really nice include to see in there, and especially when you're running Split Ups to complement your Shiko, doubly makes sense.
So, speaking of Shiko, Athena, in a world of Cauldron, where they're potentially just going to exile whatever you're trying to hit with Shiko, is Shiko just too high of a risk?
I'm going to say no, not for the main board, right? I think a lot of the time you're able to keep the Cauldron off of the board with a deck like this, between a Braids and Seams and whatever other kind of tech you want to run, regardless of what's in this exact build or not. I think that Shiko is a card that wins you game one pretty often, and I think post-board, right, you're going to want to bring in the Rest in Pieces. You're fine boarding the Shiko out. It's also sort of a necessity, right? You need more threats against the Cauldron deck, and until you can get post-board and bring in more, the Shikos kind of matter, right? A 4/5 Vigilance is a 5-turn clock. And without any sort of life gain from the Cauldron side, that's a good way to stabilize and then end the game.
I mean, that's fair. I do love the fact that Shiko, in the absence of main deck graveyard hate, is just an absolute house right now. So yeah, it's kind of that like game one Bringer vibes where you're going, all right, you might have a Cauldron, but you have to hit Cauldron and you have to hit it on time or I'm taking this one. So that makes a lot of sense. And with that, we conclude our Challenger tier and move on to my favorite segment every week, Brewer's Corner. Let's dive into the spice with Boros Weapons. So, credit to Cute Chandra19 for making the finals on Halloween's 34-player MTGO challenge before losing to Simic Counter. Now let's take a look at this beauty. I'm so happy to see yet another United Battlefront deck. Like, I was always a lover of Collected Company, and this is Coco for non-creatures, so I'm here for it. It has the ups and downs that all Coco decks have, but I love that we're doing that little wombo combo here with weapons manufacturing and Pinnacle Starcage, where Starcage does this great job of just KOing your opponent if you have enough of those munition tokens built up. You just hit the Starcage, exile all of them, and immediately it leaves the battlefield and hits them for 2 per weapons manufacturing you have out. Like, that's some good stuff. So I really like where this one went, and look at the amount of removal and hate sitting at 1 mana is kind of insane. We're playing 4 Duskrose Reliquary, 4 Torch the Tower. There's Rest in Pieces in the main. Like, this is a deck that is so well teched for the current metagame. I don't know if it exists once we hit bans and everything shifts, but this would have been a weird dark horse up against Cauldron based on the way this is composed in the main.
Yeah, always love to see these weapons manufacturing decks. Acute Chandra19 in particular has been doing a lot of work. They're the same ones that made the 4-color weapons manufacturing deck a while ago back in the Edge of Eternity's meta, and always a fan to see another one of these weapons decks popping up. For now, I'm going to move to a little bit of a different way to try to attack Cauldron, where we're trying to go in a similar route to Mono Red with the aggressive route, Mono Black Aggro. Credit to Spock Vida Loca for making the top 8 of Monday night's 43-player MTGO challenge before losing to Mono Red. I think this deck is pretty staple in terms of what you'd expect out of a Mono Black Aggro deck. Instead of the Forsaken Miners we've seen people try to run with a more skeleton package, we're running Iridescent Vine Lasher, right? And with 24 lands, this is actually something you can repeatedly get out, and it's something that is a good answer to the Torch the Tower meta compared to the Miner, right? This will let you Offspring it on turn 3, you get 2 creatures, and you can't answer both of them at the same time. I think on top of that, the really cool thing here I'm seeing is we're playing Unholy Annex with main deck demons in Bloodletter of Aclazotz. And I think that's really good when you're combining it with the Unstoppable Slasher. You have a lot of these curve outs that either deal a lot of damage, draw you cards, or just straight up win the game if your opponent doesn't have the right answer. And I think those are some really powerful combinations that you kind of need in order to beat a deck like Cauldron that can outgrind everything in the format. And it's really cool to see these, especially in the absence of any sort of discard, right? We're getting the Unholy Annex to play with. It's really nice.
Yeah, Unholy Annex is potentially positioned as one of the big breakout cards depending on how this ban set goes, because it's really been held in check for months now by Cauldron being around, by a number of decks being around. But like, if we get 5 to 10 bans for Christmas like I'm hoping, then yeah, Annex might be back on the table. That said, we're going to go to ahead of the curve, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Simic Counters again. All right, gang, so credentials on this one. I'm currently in the top 50 of Mythic with it. The sideboard guide is sitting in Coffee and Grinders for all of you who have gone ahead and gotten that membership. Thank you. We do appreciate it. This build has a positive Cauldron matchup and a reasonable red matchup. That's what I like about it. And all credit is going to Athena on this one. I've tuned up a few slots here, but ultimately, Athena, this is your baby. You've really put in the time, the hours. I'm still going to present on it, but yeah, it's on you. But I want to kind of clarify the Sentinel argument here. What people, I think, are underestimating about Sentinel and about Spyglass Siren is that those map tokens smooth your draws so beautifully while simultaneously giving you power-ups for Drunith and Ouroborod, and you need both of those potentially to happen. I've had a number of games where I hit late turns, and I'll just go Drunith, map token onto it, go to 2, Flood Pit, copy. Right, you get these different patterns because of these map tokens. Or where you hit the turn 5, Nope Rope plus map token, now it's going from a 2/4 to a 4/6 instead of a 1/3 to a 2/4. You get to jump ahead because of the map tokens, and it's just such a powerful effect. I don't think it can be underestimated anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you and I both agree this is probably our favorite deck in the format to play right now, and what we would play at competitive events if we had to. I really like how this deck is positioned, right? Like you said, beats Cauldron pretty well, has a decent matchup against red, really beats up Dimir. So I'm going to take the L and agree with you on this one, right? I'm not going to fight you on what the best deck is going to be right now currently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bet for what's going to get banned on Monday, and I'm going to show you what I'll be playing after the bans, Caretaker's Control. With everything I've seen, between both things that WotC has said and how this format's shaped up, I'm taking a bet that only Cauldron or Vivi will be banned on Monday. And if that's the case, Caretaker Control is what I'd start with. This was being held back so hard by Cauldron, and without Cauldron in the format, we can start to attack the rest of the format. This is a positive matchup into both Dimir and the blue control decks, because you get to run Voice of Victory and Innocence in the main board, which are cards that can't be dealt with very easily and mess up their game plan pretty hard. People would be mostly worried about the combo decks while playing this deck, right? And sure, Omnicona, bad matchup. If that ends up being a top tier deck, sure, sue me. I don't think that's going to happen. We have High Noons for it. Probably still going to be a bad matchup. But the Bringer matchup will get significantly better post board. Kutzel's Flanker in response to the Bringer trigger means that you get your graveyard reanimated and they don't get theirs. And it's a good card that you can also tech into decks like Control, where it's just a flash threat that's a 3/1. It's just really good.
Fair. And I mean, there's something to be said about that nice little surprise factor when they go for the Bringer and you get to just blow out their graveyard and stare at them. So I'm here for that. But Mariah Carey might be defrosting as we speak, along with our favorite traditions, but all I really want for Christmas is the end of Vivi. Okay, I'd take another 10 presents in the form of bans as well, but I'm not trying to get put on the naughty list either, so comment below with your early Christmas ban list picks.
I know, I'm hoping that just Cauldron or Vivi get banned and we can leave the rest of the format alone for once, lest we end up with another situation where Cauldron has no decks that can contend with it because they banned everything else. That said, another week, another battlefield. Thanks for watching. Make sure you stay tuned for the outtakes, and until next time, Rebels, untap, upkeep, resist. Right, Carrie might be defrosting as we speak. I just saw that. I know the word paradigm, right? I know what it means. I've just never seen it spelled out. So one of the teams was Team Paradigm. And when I said it, I'm like, I don't understand what Paradigm is. I drink so much Gatorade Zero. This is my hydration because water tastes like shit in Cleveland.
I had the exact same like theory when I was in college. Just replace Gatorade with alcohol, and we're dead on. Like it's.